Hi there. It's time for this week's edition of Here's the Thing. DPR the man, that's who I am. And I was off for a week. I didn't tell anybody why, because it's not wise to tell people you're not going to be home for a week. Not that I don't trust any of you, but you saw the commercial where the lady puts it on Facebook and then the would-be burglar, shoots back at her, have a nice trip. So, bottom line, we went to Disney World down in Florida for a week and came back pretty much flat broke, but that's the way it works. You don't spend a lot of money when you're there, you spend a lot of money to get there. However, the topic of Disney will come up later in the show, as it inspired me to do a segment about things that are near and dear to my heart. Now, we move on. Today's 30-minute ride. I'll admit that I didn't look for a lot of material because I was off and I had a lot to do when I got back. What with the two cars giving us trouble at the same time immediately after, my son's electric scooter stopping. It's like everything decided to malfunction while we were gone, and now it's a matter of trying to figure out how to make it refunction, if you will. That being said, we move on. Gathering up my papers here and deciding what it is I need to do for the next 30 minutes. One of the subjects that I took up upon myself to look into recently, I've mentioned it from time to time briefly, not really gone into it a lot, is Common Core. Common Core, yes. Well, as I've said, most of my contemporaries aren't that concerned with Common Core because their children are grown and already been through the institutions, if you will. I, however, am concerned because I have a son who is yet to grow up enough to be out of school. And Common Core has reared its ugly head in his school this year. And we've actually seen some of the results. Let's go back in history for a bit. John F. Kennedy, 1968. I'm sorry, 1960. my fault. Elected president. The great concern of the American public at the time, which is why he didn't win by a lot, was he was Catholic. And the public was afraid that the federal government would start to give money to Catholic schools because John F. Kennedy was Catholic. Well, everybody was surprised and pleased to learn that John F. Kennedy was a president. And it didn't have anything to do with Catholicism. And the federal government took a stand that it always took. It stayed out of the lives of the Catholic schools and the other parochial schools. Well, times have changed. Faith-based education grants began. And Title III and Title I, all federal money, and it all went to all schools, including public, private, and parochial. Now, we've found over the years that every time the federal government gets its foot in the door, i.e. by granting money, they begin to set rules, conditions, strings are attached. It's like a spider web. You get in and you can't get out. Well, here's what happens, okay? Common Core. The government's curriculum for all schools. Now, it's not required that all schools partake in Common Core. They didn't go that far because that may have been perceived as a violation of the separation of church and state in certain situations. However, what they did do was stipulate that if the school didn't subscribe to Common Core, they could lose their faith-based grants, their government funding, their Title I's and Title III's, and any other federal assistance that may have occurred over the last few decades. So basically, the schools were in a no-win situation. They had to take it. And what does Common Core do? Well, Common Core says that all students must learn the same things at the same pace. Unless, of course, they're judged to have a learning disability or some other problem that causes them not to. However, under normal conditions, all children are the same. All tests are the same. And the tests are very carefully monitored to make sure that they're not biased towards genders, races, religions, and so forth. Trying to be all tests to all people. So every ethnic group is at a disadvantage. Every level of wealth or lack thereof is at a disadvantage because there's questions in the tests that are unfamiliar to anyone and not fair to anyone. That being said, excuse the jump, it's the best I can do for a cough button once again. This is from Politichicks.tv, Catherine Porter. And a little cartoon here has this teacher admonishing the young lady in the desk. Remember, you are supposed to obey the state, not your parents. And basically that's what the schools are being told they should teach in a roundabout way. They're basically being told that the government is going to determine what these children should learn and how they should learn it in all subjects. The government is going to make sure that the children understand that there are government programs that will take care of them, that this country was founded unjustly, that the way this country's been run over the last 200 years has been unfair to blacks, Hispanics, any number of religious and racial groups and ethnic groups. I'll be the first to admit that this country's been unfair to ethnic groups. Every time a new ethnic group came over en masse in the past, they've always been discriminated against to a point, and that's a human fault. But in the long run, they were absorbed into the society, became productive members, and had just as much of an opportunity to become famous as anyone, unless they were constantly told by the progressives that they had no chance of succeeding, and believed it. But let's move on. The article I'm looking at here talks about Miranda warnings and the Common Core. Starts out about, you've heard about Miranda rights, you know, when you tell a criminal what they have the right to do before you arrest them. And if you don't do that, they could become unarrested. Well, you can't become uneducated. You can't get out of going to school if you don't agree or aren't told about your Common Core rights. It says here that the schools are treating the parents like criminals, and that maybe we should have a warning in the style of the Miranda warning. And in honor of Aaron Duncan, the United States Secretary of Education, we'll call it the Duncan warning. You have the right to refuse the test. Any answer on the test can and will be used against your child for the rest of his or her life. You have the right to advocate for your child and exercise your parental rights. If you choose not to be your child's advocate, he or she will be forced to take the test. Your child has the right to refuse the test. Your child has the right to stop answering questions on the test after the test begins. However, if your child refuses the test, the school may bully and intimidate your child to take the test. The school may coerce your child by offering candy, good citizenship incentives, and other measures deemed necessary. The school may also bully and intimidate you, the parents, by threatening not to promote your children to the next grade, handing out guilt trips on potential loss of federal funding, and making spiteful comments that undermine parental authority. The school may punish you or your child for refusing the test. Punitive measures may include unexcused absences that lead to truancy proceedings, denial of entry into the school to attend classes during the testing window, and other consequences to communicate their displeasure. Do you understand these rights as explained to you? With these rights in mind, do you still refuse to take the test? You understand what's happening there? Okay? Basically what they're saying is that Common Core is not an imperative. Common Core is not mandatory. But if you don't go along with the program, you will suffer the consequences. Your child will suffer the consequences. Now, I'm going to relate a brief story to you regarding the school that my son attends. And I won't name the school because I don't want to embarrass them. But I will say this. Okay, it's a private, it's a parochial school. It's not a public school. They just went into the Common Core program this year, and it shows. The teachers are in a big hurry to teach what they have to teach, and teach to that test, and make sure that the test scores for the school as a whole come out where they should, so that their authority, their abilities, their level of education isn't called into question by the all-encompassing federal government. And all of a sudden we're hearing parents, including ourselves, who find that our children are not doing as well as they were. They're not keeping up. They're getting more information than they need, faster than they need it. Now I understand that things have changed. That's one of the explanations we got from one of the counselors that we spoke with regarding our son's grade issues. Things have changed. That's what the progressives always say. That's what the liberal left always says. Things have changed. No, in principle, they haven't. But in practice, they have. And the bottom line is that our son is learning mathematical lessons that I didn't have until I was in 9th grade. He's in 5th grade. Does that make me stupider? At the time, I was on the honors track. I was on the honors track. And therefore, I was learning the elite stuff. I was ahead of the game. There were even courses that I could skip because I was on the honors track. And my son is being taught things that I wasn't in 5th grade, that I wasn't taught until I was in 9th grade. Now, he's a human being. He develops at the same rate as all human beings. All children develop at, in the same general method as all other children. Some faster, some slower, some more, some less. But the general pattern's the same. The ability, the level of thinking, if you will, remains pretty much the same for the, quote, normal child. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. So all of a sudden, the school, rather than acknowledging the fact that we were concerned about the conduct of one of his teachers and the fact that he could have been being bullied, tried to convince us that he had some kind of disorder, that he had some kind of problem. We, as a result, our dutiful parents, took him to his physician, who proclaimed that he didn't have any disorders. He didn't have any problems. We knew that. He knew that. And don't think he didn't know what was going on. Don't think that he didn't feel the pressure. And don't think that that pressure had an effect on his ability to learn and pay attention in class and do what he was supposed to do. It most certainly did. So did the school treat us like criminals? No. But did the school treat us as though we didn't know what to do with our own child? Absolutely. Did it cost us time, aggravation, money out of our pockets to prove something that we already knew was true? Absolutely. So, are schools beginning to treat parents as though they don't matter? Absolutely. Is his school doing it because they want to? Probably not. Probably not, because the bottom line is schools, for the most part, are used to parents who don't care, who don't pay attention. And they can talk right over them, and the parents just, take whatever's said and do whatever they feel like doing. Well, we're not like that, and that surprises them. We went to the principal. We went to the parish priest. We took it all the way. We took it everywhere we could to make sure that they understood that we're not going to listen to them telling us who our child is or what our child's capable of. We know him. We've been with him since the day he was born. So therefore, our opinion counts. But under Common Core, our opinion doesn't count. We can't tell them to teach the children at their level. We can't tell them to allow all of the children to keep up, not run ahead like tomorrow will never come. just to make sure that they have all the information they need to take that test. We can't tell them not to teach a regimen of state-oriented rules and state-oriented agendas and state-oriented politics and ideology that says to them that don't worry about your parents, what they can do for you. Ask not what your parents can do for you. Ask what the state can do for you. Learn that when you get older, you don't have to have a job. The state will take care of you. You don't have to worry about eating. The state will take care of that. What happened to the American spirit? What happened to the work ethic? Is there something wrong with the work ethic? Well, time will tell. But Common Core, I'm going to warn you people. My contemporaries, tell your children when they have children. And anyone younger out there who has children, be aware of this. Check into it. It's not send your kid to school and don't worry about it anymore. They're being taught things that are contrary to your beliefs in all likelihood, regarding family values, religious values, political values, American values. Okay, they're being taught, for instance, that America is a discriminatory country, a segregated country. All these years we've spent trying to eliminate segregation, and all the left can do is promote it by constantly reminding us of any little thing they can to make us think that it still exists until we actually believe it. So, parents, don't get complacent. The government is not taking care of your children, and they shouldn't. They want to. They want the children to believe that they will. But if you allow that to happen, remember Hitler Youth? Have you read about that? It happened. What about in the communist countries? Okay? Where all the children were taught that they were wards of the state, that they owe their livelihoods and their well-being to the state. So, all I can tell you is, if you stay out of the picture's not going to include you. Oh, we've got to move on to this story. I love this when I saw it. This is out of CNN Money. Parja Kavlins. Okay. Jobs recovery killing entrepreneurial spirit. In an ever-continuing effort of the left to try to explain to us why it's not important that we have a job. And the reason they're doing that very simply is this: they can't create them. They've done nothing to help the economy. They've done nothing to cause job growth in this country. In fact, the jobless rate has increased steadily ever since Barack took office. It's just that so many people aren't looking anymore that it looks good on paper. That being said, here it says here, as more and more Americans find jobs, it's having a chilling effect on potential new entrepreneurs, according to a new industry report. Oh my God! The U.S. economy added 192,000 jobs last month, finally recouping all the private sector's jobs lost during the 2008 financial crisis. Bull. But as the labor market keeps growing, there's also less pressure to start a business out of necessity, said E.J. Reedy, director with the Kauffman Foundation. Okay, how does that speak to us? People aren't starting new businesses. Could it be because they don't see a financial advantage to it? Because they're not sure what it's going to cost in taxes down the road? They're not sure if they can price their product or service at what the public can afford because they have to pay for health care? All those things come into play. If you're going to start a business, You have to borrow enough money to start that business and live on that money for a year while your business takes off. That's the general rule of thumb. At least it was in the past. If you don't know what it's going to cost, you're not going to take the chance. That's the American way. Okay? The American way is you risk your money with a reasonable expectation of getting it back and turning a profit. Oh, profit, that's a terrible thing. Can't have profit. Okay, last year 476,000 new businesses were created each month, mostly in the construction and services industries. Well, that's a good thing. However, that's down 7% from 2012 when 514,000 new businesses were being created monthly. It also marks the second straight year that new business creation has dipped, putting the entrepreneurial activity at pre-recession levels. If the trend continues, Reedy is concerned that it could lead to fewer high-growth startups, which typically generate revenue and jobs at a more robust rate than other small businesses. No kidding. Okay, so we have a little conundrum here. The conundrum is this. Okay, businesses that are in existence at the present time are not hiring because of the additional cost of Obamacare, because of additional taxes, because of additional regulations, because payroll is the largest expense that any business has. And if they have to cut costs, that's one of the first places they look. Hence, layoffs, cutbacks in hours, or not hiring. Someone leaves, they don't replace them. The people that are there are asked to do more for the same money. Everybody gets unhappy. Now, why would anyone in their right mind want to open a new business when they have to face that? Dissatisfied employees, people who have been making less than they want to or not working at all are available to hire, but their expectations of what they're supposed to earn and what the benefits they're supposed to have are the same as they were before Obamacare, before the additional regulations, before the additional taxes. I wonder how much companies are paying for unemployment insurance right now, considering how much is being shelled out and what the possibilities are that more could be shelled out down the road, because this recession isn't over by any stretch. But getting back to the subject, how, this is the left at work. Cloud the issue. Bury it in so much bullcrap that you can't find out what's really going on anymore, or you forget what happened in the past, because so much information is being thrown at you in the present that it clouds where it all came from. It all came from a recession in 2008, a crash of the economy, and Barack Obama coming along saying he was going to solve it all with hope and change, which turned out, as I've said many times before, you hope you have enough change in your pocket when he's done with you to continue to live your life. Okay, bottom line, as an entrepreneur, why do it? What good is it going to do you? What good is it going to do you? It says here that men are substantially more likely to start a new business than women, and they led the decline. Well, because they normally lead in the startups. Business startup rates slipped across all racial and ethnic groups as well as among immigrants. The report did surface one contrary trend. Older adults ages 45 to 54 opened more new businesses last year. Okay, now, what kind of businesses are being opened? Bacon bowls, spray sealants and spray cans, inventing companies who back inventions, advertising on TV to submit your invention and they'll make money for you. Are those sustainable businesses? Probably. Are some of them good ideas that take off and make a lot of money? Probably. But are they companies who employ a lot of people? No, they're not. They employ the person who invented it. They employ the person or a couple few people in a family who take it upon themselves to do the business. They don't end up hiring a lot of people. They don't have a big office staff. Generally what happens is they sell the rights to someone else and live off that money. And that's their prerogative. Good for them. That's the American spirit. Come up with an idea that works, and you're compensated. Do something productive, and rewards come your way. Oh, but wait a minute. The government's got to get their share. The government's got to get their taxes. The government's got to make sure that you're environmentally sound. The government's got to make sure that you're obeying all the safety regulations. The government's got to make sure that you provide health care for yourself and anyone who works for you. And all of a sudden, you don't live off the money that you make from your invention. All of a sudden, you've got to grow your business. You're forced to hire people, if you will. It's a conundrum. It's a conundrum. It's a circular logic. The left is trying to convince the American public that it's not important that they have a job because they cannot provide those jobs. They cannot provide the stimulation in the economy that's required to create those jobs. Indeed, they're trying to take it away. They're trying to make companies shrink. They're trying to take power away from the public sector. They're trying to control more and more of our economy, and therefore have a larger and larger part in our lives. How we think, how we act, how we produce, for whom we produce. I mean, these little articles come along and you don't think much of it at first. But when it catches my eye, I know that in my mind somewhere there's something that says, hey, wait a minute, this is connected. This fits into a bigger picture. This goes back a ways and it'll go forward a ways. It speaks to many issues. It speaks to many truths that people miss because of the conflicting load of bullcrap that's being thrown at you every single day. Weed through it. Look at the big picture. What's really happening? 92 million Americans out of work who are capable of working. Okay, that's a quarter of our population. That's unsustainable. Who's going to pay for all that? Who is paying for all that? Who will be able to pay for all that down the road? So jobs are evil now. If more people get jobs, well, nobody starts up new companies. Let's take care of what we have first. Let's get the people who are presently running companies, let's give them an incentive to grow. Let's give them an incentive to hire more people. Let's give them an incentive to expand. There's nothing wrong with that. It's always worked in the past. It's always worked in the past. Wherever there's money involved, there's going to be corruption. Wherever there's money involved, there's going to be graft. There's going to be political payoffs, if you will. Okay, bad thing. But it's life, folks. It's the way things go. If you let the public sector run itself, it'll run itself for a profit. That's what it's supposed to do. That's what this country is about. That's what it was founded on. That's what the revolution was about. The revolution was about economics. The revolution was about the forefathers wanting the rights they had as Englishmen extended to them as colonists. They expanded upon that by eliminating the type of government that controls things to the point where the private sector can't prosper, can't own property, can't make a profit when they do something worthwhile. It carried on through the Teddy Roosevelt era, the trust buster, taking down the economic giants of the time who may have been doing something evil at the time by controlling the prices of things to their benefit, and the public had to pay. But the public was working. The recessions, they occurred, they always occur, they always will occur. But if you think for 1 second that the government is capable of preventing recessions or curing depressions, you're wrong. They don't. The American people pull themselves up every time. Can they pull themselves out of this one? It depends a lot about how people vote in the next couple of elections. Okay? It depends on whether or not a message can be sent to the Washington politicians that we don't want big government. We don't need big government. Big government's not going to take care of us. We're aware of that, and it had better stop, or we may have to find a way to take care of ourselves, something which they're very fearful of, which is why people like myself are under fire, which is why the Tea Party is under fire. Every article I read and bring up on this show has to do with that big picture, and that's why I do this. So we move on. Every week, we do our foray into the Constitution of the United States of America. This week is no exception. Okay, we've been through the text of the Constitution, the biggest part, which really isn't that big. Okay? We've been through the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, all of which were passed on September 25th, 1789. Only a couple of years after the Constitution itself was ratified. We move on into all the amendments, okay? Now, we're not going to go into a lot of detail on each one because it takes a lot of time. We may talk about them down the road, but for now, let's look at the 11th, 12th, and 13th Amendments. March 4th, 1794, Amendment 11 makes states immune from suits from out-of-state citizens and foreigners not living within the state borders. Lays the foundation for sovereign immunity. Means you can't sue the government without the government's approval. Okay, that's the basic problem there that was solved. The 12th Amendment revises presidential election procedures. Basically what it did was it made the Electoral College possible. The Electoral College was there, but the people, it wasn't based on the people's vote. It was based on the votes of the state legislatures. And the people's vote counted towards what the state legislature did, but it was a multi-layered process that had to be cleared up. It made it very simple. How the popular vote in a state determines where the state's electoral votes go. Okay, and the electoral votes are based upon the number of congressional districts that the state has. And one of the most important amendments of all, January 31st, 1865, the 13th Amendment, abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. That's where the African Americans, many of whom were indeed African Americans at the time, were freed. We're told you no longer have to work for nothing. You now can become productive citizens. Now, there were a few things that had to be solved yet at that time. There were a couple of amendments later when they solved a few more issues. Okay, the 3/5 of a person thing, and so forth. There were a lot of problems back then. A lot of compromises had to be made. But do people understand what was going on back then? The country went through a civil war, a bloody mess, because half the country wanted to keep slaves and the other half didn't. It was an economic war based on people who wanted to make a living doing what they always did and not have it interfered with by the federal government. Slavery was a horrible thing and never should have happened. And I'm not saying that the South was right, but I'm saying that they knew what they were fighting for. They lost. Perhaps that was a good thing, yes? However, by abolishing slavery completely and giving all the rights to the African Americans immediately may have caused another civil war. So rather than do that, they had to compromise. They had to go about it gradually. They had to accomplish it over time. It took a while to undo the decades and decades of injustice that were done to the African people that were brought over here as slaves. It took them a long time to keep the institution rolling. It took them a long time to get rid of it. But they got rid of it. They got rid of it. Okay, they made them citizens. They made them equal. They gave them the opportunities. And decades passed, and segregation continued. That was a human thing, not a government thing. The government turned a blind eye. That was a terrible thing. But as time went on, the government and the people got together and figured out how to solve that problem. It can be done. And today it can be done faster because information travels faster. But if you allow people to shove things down your throat, saying that their change is going to be good, and not give you time to think about it, you end up finding out that the federal government has a better idea on how to run your life than you do. That's a problem. This document that I go over every week tells you where it's at, tells you what should be, tells you about equality under the law, and equality of opportunity, and economic equality. It does not tell you that everyone is the same, because we're not, and we shouldn't be. Because people in countries where everyone is the same are, even as we speak, protesting that situation. They're not the same. There's nobody who's more equal than anyone else, but they're not the same. So, the Constitution. 11th, 12th, and 13th Amendments. We'll go over some more next week. Well, once again, you can heed the universal sigh of relief as the show is nearing an end. Just a reminder to those who are audio fans of the show as opposed to video, you can contact this show at hdt2010@roadrunner.com. You can view us on Google or YouTube. You can look at the heresdathing.com Facebook page or visit www.heresdathing.com. Your material, your feedback, your opinion is important. You tell me what you're thinking, and I will tell you why you're thinking it. And so, we have reached the end of this week's edition of Here's the Thing for April 23rd, 2014. DPR the man, that's who I am. And, in my own inimitable way, I will wish you a good day, a good week, a good life. Come back next week. Stay tuned in, stay turned on, and stay with me for next week's edition of Here's the Thing. You may even be a part of it. Sounds new, doesn't it? So long from Lorain, Ohio, the internet radio capital of Northeast Ohio.